What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over my Season 5 Pulverize build here that I like to call Juggernaut. Now, before we get into the build, I just want to say that I did see the campfire chat, and I did go over the patch notes, and I plan on making a video about it probably sometime tomorrow or the following day, but man, Pulverize is looking really good for Season 6. I also want to say that after going over those patch notes, I definitely have absolutely zero plans on swapping from Druid to Spiritborn, and you guys can count on me to bring you all the hardcore Druid content I can when the expansion finally launches. But we're not quite there yet, and there is still plenty of Season 5 left over, so let's go ahead and talk about the build. So for the skills, we are going to be using Pulverize, we are going to be picking up the Cataclysm Ultimate because we will be using the Mjolnir Ring. Then we're going to be using Claw just to keep our buffs up pretty easily here. Then we're also slotting an Earthen Bulwark for that easy crowd control break. Then we have Poison Creeper just to apply poison so we get the most out of our Envenom passive. Then last but not least, we're going to be running Cyclone just so that way we have a little bit more non-physical damage reduction. Now into our spirit boons. For the deer, we are going to be running Gift of the Stag because we will be using the Locrin's Talisman for this setup. Then for the eagle, we're spirit bonded here and we're picking up Iron Feather as well as Avian Wrath. On the wolf, we are going to be picking up Calamity to extend the duration of our Cataclysm. And then for the snake, we're going to be running Calm for the Storm so that way we can reset our Cataclysm a little bit faster. Now, I did want to mention that while you are running Infernal Horde, during the Waves section of your Infernal Horde, go ahead and swap Calm for the Storm over to Obsidian Slam because you'll get quite a few overpowered procs off of that. However, when you get to the boss fight, go ahead and swap it back because you really won't get any benefit out of Obsidian Slam. Now, as you guys can see up here at the top, there are 3 different build variations. So the first one is just a basic setup. The second variation is much like the gear I currently have equipped, so that way it gives you an idea as you start to transition into your better pieces of gear. And then the very last setup has the best in slot gear, which I probably will never touch in any season of Diablo. However, I did want to mention that in the best in slot gear, when you're running your boons, go ahead and swap your deer over to Weariness so you get damage reduction because we will not be using a Locrin's Talisman on the best in slot gear setup. Now moving on to the aspects and uniques of the build. So for the helmet, we're going to be running a Godslayer crown. Then on the chest piece, we're running the Insatiable Fury unique. For the gloves, we are using the aspect of the Ursine Horror. Then for the pants, we're going to be using the aspect of Quicksand to slow enemies. For our boots, we're going to be running a pair of Flicker Steps. That way we can cool down our Cataclysm by dodging through enemies. On our two-hand weapon, we're slotting in the Shockwave aspect. Then for our amulet, we're going to be running Locrin's Talisman. For our first ring, we're going to be slotting in the aspect of Retaliation here. And then for our second ring, that's going to be the Mjolnir Ring. Now down here in this text box, I did write in that while you're doing Infernal Hordes during the waves, go ahead and swap out your aspect of Retaliation ring for an Erida's Inexorable Will ring because it's a lot easier to cluster enemies together and burn them down quickly. But do remember, once you're through the waves section of Infernal Horde, go ahead and swap it back to the aspect of Retaliation ring for the boss fight. Now moving on to the mid-tier gear setup, and this is more or less what my gear looks like currently, and I will be showing that to you guys as soon as we're done going over all of the gear stats in a second. But let's go ahead and look at this real quick. So for our helmet, we're running a Harlequin Crest, aka a Shaco. Then for the pants, we swapped into a Tebow's Will. And then on our first ring, we're running the Ring of Starless Skies. Now for the best in slot setup, there really isn't much of a difference. We just move around some of our affixes, which we'll go over. But we are going to be taking off the Locrin's Talisman and running the aspect of Retaliation on our amulet. And that's mainly because we're going to be going after those really powerful passive affixes we can roll on our amulet to really increase the damage of our Pulverized build pretty significantly. Then down here at the bottom, I did go ahead and add in a little bit of information for you guys for optional swaps if you're interested. So do give it a look over and see if it's something that you might be able to incorporate in your build. Now moving on to our gear stats. So for our base setup on our Godslayer crown, we're going to be prioritizing cooldown reduction. On our chest piece, we're going to be prioritizing Ursine Strength's bonus. Then for our gloves, we're going to be prioritizing ranks to Pulverize. We're also going to be picking up the critical strike chance and max life affix. And for our temp rings, we're going to be running damage to crowd control enemies as well as a lucky hit chance to freeze, immobilize, or stun. It's up to you guys which one you want to run. Then on our pants, we're going to be grabbing up a greater affix to armor and getting one masterworking crit there so we can cap out our armor with just one piece of gear. Then we're going max life, willpower, and then for our temp rings, we are running Earthen Bulwark cooldown reduction as well as, again, a lucky hit chance to stun, immobilize, or freeze. For our Flicker Step boots, I want you to prioritize as much damage reduction as you possibly can. Then for our two-hand weapon, we are going to be using a two-handed mace for that big giant roll of overpower damage we get. Then we're going to be running willpower, max life, and critical strike damage. And for our temp rings, we're going to be running earth critical strike chance as well as pulverize size. For our Lachran's talisman, go ahead and prioritize critical strike damage because we are going to be getting a lot of critical strike multiplier in this build, so it will definitely go a long way in terms of boosting up your damage. Then for our aspect of retaliation ring, you want to be running critical strike chance, attack speed, and max life. And then for the temp rings, we're getting more damage to crowd control enemies as well as the cataclysm cooldown reduction here. And then last but not least, for our Mjolnir ring, I like to prioritize willpower. However, if you would like, you can go ahead and pick up more ranks to Endless Tempest so that way you can sustain your Cataclysm a little bit longer if you're having issues keeping your Cataclysm up the majority of the time. Now onto our mid-tier gear setup. Obviously, we're going to be prioritizing that cooldown reduction as much as possible. Then for our T-Bow's Will, we're going to be going after that damage reduction while unstoppable. Moving on to our gloves, nothing really changes too much here except that if you're able to get over 100% critical strike chance, go ahead and swap your glove offensive tip ring into some extra critical strike damage. Then for our two-hand weapons, so we can cap out our Earth and Devastation node, we are going to be swapping into damage to crowd control enemies on the offensive tempering. And then the only other significant change to this setup is the Ring of Starless Skies, and if you have that unique, you want to prioritize as much attack speed as you possibly can. However, core skills is perfectly fine too. Now moving on to our best in slot gear stats, we are going to be swapping some of our offensive temp rings back to what they were previously on the base setup because we are going to be running a normal amulet. So for our gloves, we want to be running the damage to crowd control enemies on the offensive temp ring. Then for our two-hand weapon, we are going to be running the Earth Critical Strike Chance temp ring. And then really the big change in this setup, and something I will probably never see in my entire lifetime of playing Diablo 4, and that is an amulet with Critical Strike Chance, ranks 2 in Venom, and ranks 2 Quick Shift. And then we are going to be putting some damage to crowd control enemies on the offensive tip ring, and then picking up some bonus ranks to Digigrade Gate here. Now, I did want to go ahead and mention that if you are able to get super lucky and cap out your crit chance well above 100%, you can go ahead and roll off this critical strike chance affix on your amulet and pick up a different damage boosting passive, or you can go with something like willpower percent instead. But now that we've finished going over the gear stats, let me go ahead and show you guys my gear. So starting off, we have a basic Harlequin Crest. Then we have an Insatiable Fury with a greater affix to max life. For our gloves, we got super lucky here because we got that greater affix to pulverize ranks. Then we also have a really good T-Bow's Will with a greater affix to damage reduction. For the Flicker Step, we got a greater affix to movement speed. Then our two-hand mace has a greater affix to willpower. We did get lucky early on and get a perfect Lachran's Talisman. Then I have a basic Starless Skies that I need to re-roll for attack speed. And then a pretty solid Mjolnir ring as well. And then we are holding a pair of Waterheart Hunger Boots in our inventory that we'll swap into sometimes. And then we do also have a pretty nice Erda's Inexorable Will. So as you guys can see there, we certainly have some decent gear, but it is nowhere near the best it could possibly be. However, I did want to go ahead and mention that even with our gear the way it currently is, I have been able to hit overpowers upwards of over 400 million damage. So even with this setup, we're still smacking pretty hard, and like I said, there is a ton of room to still improve upon the damage as well as the survivability of this setup. Now let's talk about the gems. So for our weapon, we're running emeralds. On our armor, we're running rubies to increase our HP. And then for all 3 of our jewelry pieces, we are slotting in diamonds. However, when you're running the mid-tier or best in slot tier, go ahead and remove one of these diamonds and slot in a skull just to make sure you're reaching armor cap. Moving on to our skill tree, and there are slight differences with the setups with the Harlequin Crest, so do give those a look over. But for our basic skill, we're going to be running Claw and then going into Fierce Claw so we can apply poison really easily to a single target. Then on our core skill tree, we're going 1 point Heart of the Wild into 3 points Wild Impulses. Then we're grabbing 5 points Pulverize and then going into Raging Pulverize for that big overpower multiplier. And then we are grabbing 1 point Predatory Instinct into 3 points of Iron Fur. For our defensive skill tree, we're going 1 point Earthen Bulwark into Enhanced Earthen Bulwark for the Unstoppable. And then we're grabbing 1 point into Cyclone. For our companion skill tree, we're just putting 1 point into Poison Creeper here. Then for our Wrath skill tree, we're going 1 point Elemental Exposure into 3 points Endless Tempest. 3 points Mending, as well as 3 points Provocation. Then we're going 1 point Crushing Earth, 1 point Safeguard, and 3 points into Stone Guard. And then we're going 1 point Neurotoxin, and then 3 points into the Druid's best passive, Envenom. Moving on to our ultimate skill tree, we're going 3 points Defiance into 1 point Circle of Life. Then we're picking up all 3 points of Cataclysm, so we extend the duration as well as apply Vulnerability here. Then we're grabbing 3 points Quick Shift into 3 points Heightened Senses, and then we're also picking up 3 points into Defensive Posture. And then for our key passive, we're going to be running Earth Sign Strength. Moving on to our Paragon board. So on our starter board, we're going to be slotting in Outmatch here. Then for our second board, that's going to be Survival Instincts, and we are going to be picking up the Legendary node, and then we're going to be slotting in Spirit here. For our third board, that's going to be the Constricting Tendrils board, and we are going to be slotting in Fang and Claw here. On our fourth board, that's going to be Ancestral Guidance, and then we're slotting in Werebear here. However, if you don't need the damage reduction, you can go ahead and swap out the Werebear glyph to something like Tectonic instead. On to our fifth board, that's going to be the Earth and Devastation board. We're picking up the Legendary node, and then we're also going to be slotting in Earth and Sky here. Then on to our sixth board, that's going to be the Inner Beast board, and we are slotting in Dominate here and picking up as many Intelligence nodes with our extra Paragon points as we can. And then after that, we're going to be moving right back into the Constricting Tendrils board so we can get a little bit more damage to crowd control enemies to buff up our Earth and Devastation node, as well as pick up this set of HP nodes here. But that's really it for the video, guys. That is my Pulverize build here for Season 5, and it's probably my favorite build so far this season. Now, I do wish the damage was a little bit more consistent with Pulverize. However, after going over those patch notes, I certainly cannot wait to try this out in Season 6. But anyways, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and as always, if you have any questions whatsoever regarding any of my builds, all of the links are down in the description of this video, and you can post out those questions in the comments section, and I will answer them as soon as I see them. But as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out. I will see you in the next one.